Oh, Andrea Tessman, I have to start this a little differently than we normally do.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, I think since we're a show about how the hell did this get to number one, and let's just, again, clarify for anyone listening brand new to this. This isn't necessarily always, how the hell did this get to number one? It's like, oh, how did this get to number one? A very significant individual, pretty big in my childhood, a former number one artist, has passed away. Eddie Van Halen. And I'm still rocked by this.
Tragedy.
Yeah. We record this every Tuesday night, so this doesn't always go up until a few days later. So this is still pretty fresh in our mind. I know, like, I sent you a message and asked you, so do we open up with this little bit? So I guess I just sort of, like, implied that I wasn't really, that I was kind of acting on that little bit. I guess I'm not going to win an Oscar, huh?
No, not so much.
No. So, but yeah, that one really got to me. I'm sort of happy that I got to see them live. That was one of the few bands that I really wanted to check off my list. I did so. This was actually when Pauline and I were still dating, and she didn't really know she doesn't know anything about rock music. So she still calls him Van Halen.
Well, that's just cute, though.
In her little Asian accent, it is, yes. And so I just when we were living in Toronto, so I got a pair of tickets, and she didn't really want to go, and then I reconnected with someone I hadn't seen forever, went with her, and so I came back, and she said, so, like, how's your old friend doing? I said, well, it turns out she's a stripper now. I was never allowed to see her again. True story.
Nice. I believe it.
Yeah. But everyone would sort of agree that Eddie was in the top 10 guitarists of all time. Some will say number one.
I think it depends on the style of guitar, but yeah, definitely. I'd say easy top 5.
No, definitely. And also, too, like, the driving force behind, the band Van Halen. I remember, and obviously I'm showing my age here. So when they broke up and would have been 85, and so I would have been 13, I thought, that's it. I mean, there's no way that they're going to last without David Lee Roth. And that's not knowing that Eddie was essentially the brainchild before everything, and David Lee Roth is just a goofball. And also just a gigolo.
And a goofball, but yeah.
Yeah. Not that he's not talented, but Eddie knew how to get the most out of that man's talent. When David Lee Roth was left to himself, you saw some, well, I think the video for California Girls sort of sums it all up.
Yep, that's kind of about right.
So it's tragic. He's gone. So we are going to dedicate the show to the memory of the late, great, always will be great, Eddie Van Halen.
Perfect.
Yeah. So maybe another quick note, too, because just right an hour before, another number one artist died. So just a quick note to him. In my birth year, 1972, Johnny Nash, I can see clearly now, just passed away, too. I didn't really see as to why that is.
No, I have not seen that, but I can... Just says he was 80.
Mm-hmm. So, rest in peace, Johnny. Rest in peace, Eddie. And this is for you. So now I can go back to my usual intro. Oh, Angela.
Okay.
Jesus, I gotta edit that out. We're not Angela. Actually, maybe I won't edit this out because this is the perfect way to segue into my greatest impression of all time, Tony Danza.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Want to hear it?
Sure.
Angela! Mona! Samantha! Did I make this worse, or should I just continue?
I think you should just let's forget that ever happened and continue on.
I'll probably leave that in because I'm just that type of guy.
Yeah, I get it.
I'm glad you do, because I don't know that I necessarily do. Oh, Andrea Tessman, I have a question for you.
What's that, Kirk Buchner?
On March 5th, 1966, What were you doing?
You bloody well know that neither one of us was alive.
Well, I didn't expect such a blunt answer, but yes, that would be correct. I was aware of that possibility and probability and deafnicity. That's a new word I just made up, deafnicity.
I like it.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll allow it.
I appreciate that. The judges say, yes, we'll allow it. Well, here's what a lot of people were doing. I don't know what movies they were watching because I couldn't find anything good. But they were probably collecting all their Beatles albums and burning them because 2 days before, John Lennon said that the Beatles were more popular than Jesus Christ. A couple days later, the new Syrian president called for a war of liberation against Israel. I'm not sure how that worked out in the Middle East. I hope everything calmed down. I haven't really checked on that.
I mean, it's been a long time. You'd think things would have calmed down by now. So,
okay, so
yeah,
it's probably good. And something that we know didn't really work out, President Johnson got awarded through Congress and the Senate $4.8 billion earmarked towards the Vietnam War. And this is kind of relevant. This is actually very relevant to the strangest number one hit in 1966. I wouldn't say strangest of all time, but this song just doesn't fit. It's the Ballad of the Green Beret by Sgt Barry Sadler. A real sergeant.
Staff Sergeant Barry Sadler of the Green Beret.
An actual Green Beret.
An actual Green Beret. And he's, it's interesting as it doesn't fit because this marching, military marching tune it's been around since pretty much Napoleon. In America, the John Philip Sousa in the 19th century was really prolific for it, but much more grandiose. But just that driving of snare drums and it could have been straight out of the First or Second World War, yet it was popular in the 60s. It was the number one hit in the 60s. It doesn't fit.
I think this is the last year that could have been a hit.
Well, it definitely was a hit because it brought about patriotism. It's that the whole point of this style of music is to invoke an emotional response to patriotism and unity and make people willing to go to war and kill them, well, not kill themselves, and die for their country.
Well, in this song they did.
We're not kamikazes. Exactly. And the song, as it builds, he dies, but it gets more patriotic. And then he talks about making sure his son becomes special ops, and that's even more patriotic. They add more voices, and they add horns in the background going ba-ba-da-da. And it's all about glorifying the war, which I think is key because I think people were getting pretty darn disillusioned with Vietnam at this point.
Or they're really starting to. And it was this certain backlash that was really starting to build, and now this was almost a backlash to the backlash. Mm-hmm. Before pop culture said, no, this is for the young. We'll take it from here. So, but Barry Sadler was a young man. He was born in 1940, so he would have been 26 when this came out. And just the visual of watching him sort of perform is very, very different. I spent a bit of time, not actually for this, but just in general, just putting in a loop of just old Ed Sullivan performances. And he certainly stands out because he's one without the sideburns or the longish hair. He's not pandering to the camera. He's actually trying to sing to it. I think like a lot of other troubled youth, he didn't really know where to turn. So he didn't grow up necessarily in the most ideal background. So the military was his refuge, and he did. This isn't something that he wrote, or that was wrote for him. He wrote it. He wrote it. Did this on his own. Sang it, and somebody sort of put him in touch with one adjutant to another, and they actually recorded this at Fort Bragg. Yeah.
And, he recorded this after he was, well, I guess maybe while he was recovering from an injury, and I think it was the end of his military career. I don't think he ever went back after that. He was special ops, and then he enlisted but he moved to being a field medic, and he ended up with a knee injury that got badly infected and he had to be back to Fort Bragg to recover. And an interesting thing I found that's actually current day is in the States they're doing studies on how military music and this sort of battle march is actually helping with soldiers with PTSD and brain injuries. And there's music therapists that are working with vets to write these types of songs about their experiences, both in order to kind of accept and move on from them, and also to relive some of the camaraderie and things like that. So I thought that was just a really fascinating aside of he kind of was doing this while he was convalescing, and current day they're actually using this as therapy. So
yeah, it was just like it was such a fluke thing to even happen. And again, I got to go back to this whole landscape of 1966. I was reading a few articles from some music critics, not recently, but just where a couple of it said that they believe that 1966 was the greatest musical year in American music, in terms of like rock music, of course. And I can see where their point is coming from, without doing any real research. I mean, like that's 2.5 years into the British invasion. It wasn't just the Beatles, with the Rolling Stones, the Who. The psychedelic sound from British blues was really starting to hit. Cream, the Yardbirds, same guy with Clapton.
Yeah.
And essentially, Steppenwolf. Yeah, Steppenwolf. Yeah. The Trogs had that giant hit in '66. Which I think is the greatest garage rock song of all time, and Wild Thing. Motown was
Wild Thing.
Make My Heart Sing. That was really white of me, but hey, they were white, so that's okay. Motown.
You're right. There's so much fantastic rock out there, but this is just such a opposite from all of that. And is it the boomers of the day decided that this was going to be popular, or
yes, it has to be. It has to be.
What's the reasoning for it?
Well, this is also too when singles were just as big as albums. So this isn't necessarily off any strength of an album, as it is a strength of people just buying singles. If this was like closer to June, I think this would be like the perfect Father's Day gift for a lot of people. In '66, and maybe it was. A few months down the road.
It sold something like 1 million copies in 5 weeks. Like, that's a lot.
Well, structurally, the song itself, I mean, it's not a song I will ever sort of play. It's not a song I ever downloaded. It's just one of those anomalies I always sort of wanted to know more about, which is why I picked it. Also, I picked it because I figured this way my dad will listen, because it's the only song he knows of anything we've ever covered. Because when I said we're going to do Milli Vanilli, he asked who was she. When I said we're going to do Sinead O'Connor, he asked who was he.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, Kirk's dad, Mr. Buchner, I hope you're listening. So what was I going to say about this? Oh, you were talking about...
the musical structure. I mean, because it's simple, easy to follow, and it's a story.
It's a big... Yeah, and that's really the exact marching tune style. Repeat the melodies. You don't have a chorus or a bridge. It's easy to remember, so people can sing it as they're marching. You keep a pace going, and you just... It's fast enough to make some speed, but not fast enough to wear anyone out. Also, this melody is used over and over and over and over again in various school fight songs or team fight songs. And there's a billion spoofs on it, which is kind of fun, including Canadian Bacon. As they prepare to invade Canada, they play it.
Stan Smith's favorite song in American Dad.
Oh, that's right, it is, too. And it even made it on The Simpsons, just as a record image, as someone's flipping through a record collection, but it's there.
I forgot that.
So, yeah, it's, it definitely, I mean, what? If you made it on The Simpsons, you're famous, right? That's how it works.
Well, Hello Mutta, Hello Fada was on there once.
Here I am at Camp Granada.
If that went number one, I would roast that. That is the dumbest song ever.
It's just a campfire song.
Okay, it's a campfire song. I'm going to go on a tangent because it's my show and I can do this. When he goes, hello, Mutta, and the whole people are laughing, he didn't say anything funny yet. He just said, Mutta. Hello, Fada. Here I am at Camp Granada. Like, God damn it. It's the worst laugh track since MASH.
Very entertaining.
And they said, we'll have fun when it stops raining.
It's early days of the laugh track, Kirk. Come on.
All right. Well, that's... I just had to get that out there. It was right there, and I had to run with it. I never thought I was going to be talking about that. I don't even remember the name of that artist. Who was that?
I have no clue.
Alan Sherman. Why do I know this?
That I don't know.
Ask me what year I got married, and I struggled between 2007, 2008, or 2009. But I know it was Alan Sherman who sang "Hello Mutta, Hello Fada." That's not good.
I'm impressed.
Yeah. Oh dear God. But yeah, I think it was just. I think it also appealed to just a lot of other people. If you were into sort of country music, you would probably buy that. It wasn't a country hit, but it followed, a similar structure. Even if you were into folk music without really knowing what folk music was, obviously this had nothing to do with Bob Dylan or Peter, Paul and Mary, Pete Seeger, any of these other great folk acts. It had a folk feel to it in its own way.
Yep, definitely. Certainly would appeal to the folk fans much more than the rock fans of the day.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's just like all that weird combination that made him a hit, got him on Ed Sullivan, got him on all the major shows. And then what happened to him? Not much. Well, nothing good.
Well, he had a pretty prolific writing career.
He did, but before...
And I didn't actually look into what the books were, but it seems like some super cheesy serial about was it the guy that put the dagger in the side of Jesus? Something like that. He wrote about 22 books in his relatively short life post this song.
But it took him a while to get there, because at that point, he was trying to do what any other musician is going to do in that position. You try to follow up. So he had like one minor hit. So he actually technically had more top 30 hits, because he had a second single called The A-Team, went number 30. So he actually is more successful in the United States in terms of singles than our last person we talked about, Sinead O'Connor. Go figure.
Did she not have a second top 30? Wow.
Well, if you count the alternative charts, yes.
But not on the...
Yeah, not on the mainstream. But that's in the U.S. I mean, in other countries, it was very, very different.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But so he had one more minor hit.
But it was the same idea.
It was released a year later. And then he tried his hat at acting. He did a couple of movies and a couple of TV shows. Like an episode of a couple of TV shows, not any sort of series. And then he started writing.
Yeah. It's a rough sort of transition for someone like that, because you go from like star to nerd in 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you can sort of... I'm trying to think of a modern equivalent, and I can't really do it. Maybe Spencer and Heidi from whatever that show was. I didn't see it, but I know it was a big reality thing like 15 years ago. And
no, I don't remember. But he also, he was elite military.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was honorably discharged around the time that this song came out. And then he was a star for a very short period of time. So that's a huge transition in your life from military elite to fame. And then suddenly you have no more fame and you have no more military. And that's going to do something to your psyche. Like, what do you do with yourself now?
Well, he started to get he owned a bar. And this was like
did he own a bar?
Yeah,
I didn't check that bit.
Yeah, so he owned a bar actually in between that period before he sort of like went into that writing, which really became his second career. So he was doing a bit of that. Apparently, he recorded some country music, but it was all released posthumously. I guess they were trying to sort of like cash in a bit of that. But so I think the big thing here too is in the late 70s, he got charged with second-degree murder for killing a lover's ex-boyfriend.
Right between the eyes. One shot. Don't mess with military elite.
I would say so.
I was a little shocked when I read that, and then reading the write-up about what happened, I was like, you know what? It may or may not be self-defense-ish. I think at the end, what was the story? He was out with the woman. He was dating this woman. The woman's ex-lover starts threatening them. They called the police. The police never came. And then he went out a side door, and the guy was there, and he thought he pulled a gun on us. So he basically pulled his gun and shot him between the eyes. And it turns out the other guy was not armed. But that's scary. Who knows what the reality of it is?
Well, from what I can read, it's a whole lot of courtroom magic. Basically, it seems like almost the ultimate America story in its own weird way. Former American hero gets disgraced, but he sort of lives off his reputation. Crooked lawyer gets him off, and killing a lover's ex-boyfriend in the city of Nashville, the country music capital of the world. That's a country music song.
Yeah, and he didn't get off. His lawyer got him 5 years, and then whatever magic, and he served 30 days, I think. He was sentenced to not manslaughter, but not premeditated murder. So, and I think that probably comes down to your trained, highly skilled military person. If you shoot someone, they're going to die. So you kind of have to, you knew you were killing him. You could have probably maimed him rather than killing him.
I think the other thing, too, that's sort of interesting that I was coming across, because we've talked about a few people who, I guess, when we went with Shifty Shell Shock and Crazy Town, who is, embracing his one-hit wonderdom. Sadler apparently was just bitter and pissed off. Got tired of answering the same questions over and over again, which I get. I totally understand that. Why would he want to answer that? And it's the same question he's been asked since 1966. And then he eventually felt that he wasn't really treated well by the Army. He felt exploited. So indirectly, I don't want to say that he became necessarily the thing that he hated, but I think that the later version of Barry Sadler hated the earlier version of Barry Sadler.
Could be. It could be why he moved to Guatemala. Guatemala? Yeah.
Yeah, Guatemala, where it did not end well. And that's where...
It did not end well.
Yeah, and everything becomes so murky. I mean, so here you have a guy, like you said, he's sort of basically writing schlock books, lots of violence, lots of sex, lots of military. So he had certainly enough knowledge to make that seem genuine. And if you wrote 22 of them, clearly they were selling.
Yeah, and then after his death, other people continued to write the series, so they had to have been popular.
So it sort of then gets murky as to why he was down there. Some say that he was actually training the Contras. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, he was shot in the head, didn't die from it. Guatemalan police, and I'm sure Guatemalan police can be very well trusted, said that it was an accident.
Oh, they said he shot himself.
Yeah, that was the accident. Yeah. He shot himself. Oops.
Yeah, I just accidentally shot myself through the temple.
Because, that can happen.
Yeah, of course.
So who knows what he was dealing with, who he was dealing with? No one really knows. And then 9 months later, he's dead.
Well, so the military American military brought him back to the States for treatment.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever his opinions of the military abandoning him or anything, his fellow Green Beret did him well and tried to do everything they could for him, and he was treated in a military hospital, but didn't recover from the brain injury.
And I think that's sort of where it gets, super interesting. I was reading this one other thing where they call him almost like a metaphor for what the Vietnam War was. Something popular that everyone could sort of could get behind. Because there was that anti-communism, which still existed years after. But, you got to stop that at all costs. They did that in Korea. They were doing that elsewhere in the world. And
God, still doing that today.
Yeah, still doing that today. But now you've got... So he had PTSD before anyone knew what that was. Hell, I never even heard those four letters strung together until 5 years ago.
Yeah, I heard it before that, but yes, it's a relatively new concept, but it's well known that you couldn't have gotten out, unless you're a sociopath, you could not have survived the Vietnam War, especially special ops, without having some PTSD. Like, I can't even imagine what those people would have seen. But of course, nobody talked about it because you had to be strong and you had to. So, there's a lot of broken military people in this world.
And I think that's also why that song was still able to resonate in '66, and then as every year sort of progressed from '66. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to remember who said this. It might have been Cronkite. I don't. You know what? I don't remember. Somebody obviously a lot smarter than me said this quote. Said what the biggest reason the United States lost the Vietnam War was because of television. Because people back home could actually see what was going on.
Oh, sorry. 1 second. I just bumped something on my computer and it hit play. Stupid commercials. All right. Yeah, television. Absolutely. Because suddenly they're broadcasting, they're showing what it looks like, and suddenly people aren't so not so much glory as guts.
Yeah, because look at all the films before that. What I'm trying to I don't know if this is true or not. I could be wrong. I know that's how it was marketed. In 1983, when Platoon came out, a lot of people, or it might have been 85, doesn't matter. So a lot of critics call that the first real war film. Because every war film before that was, people would die, but they died just like these Green Berets did. Fought for the greater good of the country. And so,
it's all glory and honor.
Right. So I'm sure there was something before Platoon, but it's not coming to me right now. So 66, you can sort of do that. And I think that's the last possible year. And I know I already said this, that you could do that. At that point, do we have a legacy for Sgt Sadler, or is it just? Isn't this how I see it? Right place, right time, right voice, right look, right ear.
No, I think that's about right. I think it just a perfect storm of opportunity, and it's why he couldn't replicate it, aside from his 30 hit a year later. But it was just a formula that worked right then and there, and there wasn't any real talent behind it, just the right combination of circumstance.
And sometimes that's all you need.
Often that's all you need.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So you've got a few that we're thinking for next week that you're sitting on.
I do, and I had decided on one.
Okay.
Then hearing the news today about Van Halen, I thought maybe we should do Van Halen.
Oh, so we're going to go to...
So what do you think? Should we
go ahead and
Van
jump?
Halen jump?
Jump!
Yep.
Go
ahead and jump!
Jump!
Yeah. I think we could dig into some Van Halen.
Yeah.
And I'll just save my other pick for another time.
All right. From the album 1984. I like it. Oh, I got to close off with something, though. This is so I'm going to test my dad to see if he actually listened all the way through. So I'm going to go through the contents of his 8-track collection from the 1977 Grand Prix and all the music that I listened to in long car drives. Want to hear this great collection of crap?
I kind of do, actually.
Okay. All right. And again, this is just to sort of put this in perspective. For music, that pretty much ended when the Beatles showed up and had long hair. He wasn't interested in music anymore. And he would have only been 21, 22. Jesus, he just stopped caring about music so early. All right, so this is what we have. The Saturday Night Fever soundtrack.
All right.
That's actually not bad.
I can respect that.
Yeah, I kind of like that one. That was maybe the only one. Because then we had, Elvis's greatest hits, but they really weren't his greatest hits. They were from 59 to 61. So it was that era where he came back from the war and was in that weird process of not really being cool, but still being cool, but anyone paying attention to music knew he wasn't cool.
Mm-hmm.
So in that really weird bracket. Still decent music, so not so bad. The Grease soundtrack, which I absolutely detest. I hate that. I hated that movie when I was a little kid. I hated it as a teenager. I hated it as a 20-year-old. I hated it as a 30-year-old. I hated it as a 40-year-old, and I still think it's the biggest piece of shit out there at age 48.
Summer lovin' had me a flag.
I never understood
You're going to alienate a huge chunk of the population saying shit like that.
So be it. I hate musicals. I hate that one the most. I do not believe that there is any chemistry between John Travolta and Olivia Newton-John. Of course, back as a kid, I didn't know why. Now I no, there's not.
The entire premise of that movie of she has a crush on him, they have a little fling, and then she entirely changes everything about her personality to suit him, just drives me insane. But I will sing along to the soundtrack every time it plays. So, there's that. I love musicals, though.
Also, when they sang "You're the One That I Want," when I was a little kid, I'm talking like 5, 6, I thought they were singing "You're the Willy Willow." Which,
and also, don't go out late at night because there's a bathroom on the right.
Jesus. So there's that one. I hated that one. There was the best of Roger Whittaker. Boy, that was awful. Roger Whittaker was this guy who just whistled a lot, sang in other languages, blah, blah, blah. Crap. The best of Freddie Fender.
No idea who Freddie Fender is.
Well, Freddie Fender, who also went number 1, he is a Tex-Mex singer.
Ooh.
Yeah. It sings a lot a lot of songs about the rain, and when it rains, it really pours. You run and hide behind closed doors. The sun, the clouds, they're everywhere. Let it rain, I just don't care. Something like that. And then James Last, this is all off the top of my head, I'm amazed I remember this. James Last's Non-Stop Disco Dancing Part 2. Never heard what Part 1 was, but we got Part 2. And there was the best of Nana Muscuri. Newsflash.
That was on my grandmother's repeat list.
And for those wondering, there is no best of Nana Muscuri. She's terrible.
She had a good voice.
I don't care. She sucked. Celine Dion has a good voice. She sucks too.
Stars on 45 would have been right in this collection for some reason.
Well, this is almost, and it finishes with the coup de grace. The 8-track that came with the car. Which is a combination of actual songs and elevator music's versions of songs.
Nice.
Yeah, I've been trying to find what the actual listing was. I could just find that it existed, which sort of proved that I wasn't really hallucinating from the copious amounts of drinking I did afterwards, and just invented this in my mind. It did exist. I can't find it. So, Dad, if you're listening, reference that. There you go.
So, considering the ridiculous tangent went on, I think that I think that the fact that we'll do Van Halen next week will be a much better tribute to late and great Eddie Van Halen than this ridiculous episode.
Yeah, the one where I called you Angela. Jesus.
Yeah, exactly.
And, well, I mean, it could be worse. I mean, I'll just sort of I was going to say, there's these two great Europeans who said, just blame it on the rain. See, a callback to a previous episode. Ah, that's what we call an Easter egg.
We've referenced, you've referenced Nilly Vanilli twice.
Mm-hmm.
We referenced Stars on 45.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important to just keep referencing later songs. So as we're picking up the multitude of new listeners that I know are flocking to this podcast, so, think about things they should go back and listen to prior episodes.
There will be historians in future decades that will do shows about this show. That is my goal in life. That and to finally solve the Rubik's Cube.
Called, did they make this podcast? And we'll be honest.
Yeah, exactly. And in 2021, Buchner had another relapse, but was denied entry into rehab because he had been kicked out 3 times before. Something like that.
Something like that.
All right, cool. Andrea, I am up to the challenge. We got legends, and I think that whole deep dive of just how Eddie kicked David Lee Roth out, or didn't kick him out, will be fun in itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right. It sounds good. Stay safe, and we'll talk next week.
Have a good week.
You too. Thank you so much for listening. Stay safe, everybody, and look for new content regularly from us at notinhalloffame.com.